Thanks. Welcome, everybody. Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights here with Rich Klein. Thank you, sponsors, Topps Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. We're going to talk about Mr. Mint. He's been gone a long time now, but many of his cohorts are still around and doing well. In fact, I think he actually had like an entourage. The secret of his success was always in the buying right. He bought big volume, and that allowed him to get a kind of a cash discount. But the secret thing behind the scenes is he had lieutenants or associates, loosely stated, but friends of his that he would parse out the materials. So he was almost like a wholesaler, but he had a cast of very interesting characters that Rich and I both knew who have gone on to hobby fame in their own right. Welcome, Rich. Does that sound intriguing to you?
That sounds wonderful. I just wonder then which one you would call Turtle.
Let's see. I did watch Entourage, and I don't...
Turtle got all the girls, so which one got? He had quite an entourage, but let's start off with somebody we've never really talked about, who's a very good friend of yours, Dick DeCourcy.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that was in the early days of Dick, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in the early days of Georgia music and sports.
But I think Dick was learning. Dick is really sharp. He understood business. He understood collectibles. But sports cards, he says, I was one of the first guys he met at his first show that was in Florida. And he didn't know what he had. And I educated him. And he thought, gosh, that guy knows a bunch of stuff. I said, well, I did write the book because this was like 1980 or something like that. He's an amazing guy. But what was his niche?
He's a collector-based dealer when you see him at the shows. What I loved best about Dick was everything was neatly set up. But he also had one of the greatest discount setups I ever saw about based on how much you paid him for your cards at your table. And the last line was, if you spend $10,000 or more with me, it's, let's say, 30% that I buy you. And I always was laughing and saying, okay, now there's a guy who understands the entire hobby.
And he is a foodie. He loves wine and good food, and he's actually a decent chef as well. Because
wasn't he also one of your golf buddies?
And he loves golf too. So what's wrong with this picture? Nothing. So he's a great guy. And one of the things he's done, I don't think other people have done, is he's branded a color. When you're at the show, you can find him by the lime green shirts, and that's ingenious. And it helps that he's loved, I think. He's not, I'm going to avoid that table. No, but do you think he got the complete sets from Rosen?
I think he and John Broggi, they were the primary people getting complete sets from Rosen. But there were other people, too, who got items from Rosen. But I would almost call Al more than a wholesaler, a distributor. He knew if he got a publication deal, he would call Joey Esposito of B&E Collectibles.
Right.
He knew that Brian Morris, if statues came into Heartland Statues or other things like that came in, he would call Brian. He knew Topps and Bowman. He could call John. He could call Dick. He could call Paul Lewicki. He could call all those people. And he did a lot with my mentor in the business, Tom Reed. They were very close.
Master of oddball.
Right. And so if he got a good oddball deal, it could go to Tom. So he knew who got what when, and he knew to mark it up at what percent. And he even dabbled in new wax. He would get cases and he would know which store owners needed what new wax. That's not something he publicized, but he'd have wax cases at home and in his office. Even his final person was from my neighboring town, a really nice man by the name of Dave Zuma. And whenever Dave and I greet each other, the first things we do is, but by the way, all our parents, I believe, are gone, but we ask how our parents are. And the reason is because it's part of the Jewish tradition to remember people always. The very sharp thing is to say, remember your family too. Because Dave knew my father, and Dave is responsible for one of my funniest hobby stories. A friend of mine, Bob and Arlene Miller, they had a store about 10 minutes from my house, and Dave would bring them stuff 3-4 times a year from Pennsylvania. And one time he brought them a lot. And we're going through the lot, and the lot had, and it was a $5 card at the time, it's more now, 110 Fergie Jenkins rookies. Now, what do you do with 110 Fergie Jenkins rookies? What we ended up doing was I kept 5 because I went through the box. Bob kept 5. And we told Dave what happened. He said, this is what we want to do. And Dave said, I'll take the 100 back. We wanted to make sure he got back what he really didn't need to put in there. hey, can we keep a few for telling you?
That's pre-grading to where you could send them all off. I've got some questions for you for some of the entourage. One of the secrets that Rosen did that I've been faced with back in the days when I bought collections is that you get the best deal if you're willing to take it all. But in the 70s, in the 80s, all frequently meant publications. And most card guys don't want a bunch of publications, a lot of weight. There's a few good things, but not that much. But Joe Esposito was his secret weapon for taking all those publications. I never knew who's the B in B&E.
I used to know that, but that was 40 years ago, and that's not something I thought about. But I think Frank Burning told me it was his brother.
I think it was his brother too, but then where do you get?
B is Esposito. B is his, or it could be his father. I'm trying to remember, but it's a family member.
By a different last name. Okay, that's one dilemma I had. The other was, whatever happened to Brian Morris? He had some Topps test material and great displays and such knowledge. I really enjoyed interacting with him over the years, but I haven't seen him in a really long time. I don't know if
I think the last time I saw Brian and his sister Karen in Baltimore. And in fact, Karen came down basically just so she could see everybody one last time. She got married, but she wanted to see everybody. I remember seeing her when I went to Baltimore on Sunday morning, and she says, "Oh, I'm so glad I saw you. You're the last person I needed to see." She wanted to see everybody, I think, at least one more time before totally saying, "I'm not in this anymore."
Did Brian get out at that time?
And Brian, I think, got out. Brian used to do the National. I haven't seen him for maybe 8-9 years. We always were very friendly. In fact, I bought some things for the company from him every show.
He had amazing stuff.
And basically, he'd give me 10% off. Fine. The coolest card I ever bought from him was the 69 Bowie Kuhn card for you. And I assume you either put it on your wall or you still have it or something.
On my wall, yeah.
It's on your wall. That was the coolest thing I ever bought. But I always found stuff at Brian's table to buy.
One more guy that's in the background is Lou Lipset. Lou had some dealings with Mr. Mint early on, and Lou is a master of pre-war, among other things. But Lou and Al had, I don't know, it was a friendship, but they did some deals together. Do you have knowledge about that?
Well, he also did some stuff with Mike Gordon. Al went through a lot of people before being able to get off on his own. You and I know, and I won't mention names. He also had some extra backing in case something really big came along before he started doing $6 million a year in business. He had some help along the way that he didn't publicize.
The whole deal that he had is the mystique of, in effect, never saying no. Because if you came to Mr. Mint and you had good stuff, the expectation was he created a mystique that you weren't going to shop it around. In fact, he just said, "Hey, this is my offer. I pay the most." He probably did pay the most at that time for somebody that would take it all. But if you used it out,
if he paid the most and he sold it to other people, is he really paying the most?
No, but the sum of the parts was greater than the whole. If you had to take the whole, his offer was good. But Dick DeCourcy and John Broggi weren't getting together and say, "Hey, we're going to do an end around Al, Mr. Mint, and we're going to get there first," because there was an ecosystem there. There was a hierarchy. There was a pecking order. And Al did the most advertising, was front and center at every show, most of the big shows, to where he was the front man for this kind of a syndication.
I did some work for John, and John for a while did split from Al. And then John was doing so well on his own. Al says, "Oh, wait a second. He's doing fine without me. Oh, let me give him some stuff and get him back in my group." And he did. And they were friendly forever. And one of the things John got from Al, which is really cool, is when Al got all these 61 fifth series cards, which helped prove what I always said about the Scourn being a short print and the other cards being a short print. And then at the 93 Nassau Coliseum show, I saw an uncut sheet where the cards we always suspected were short prints. Yeah, they were short prints. Okay, this is a slam dunk. It is done. They're short prints. It's official. But John got really great stuff from Al. So did Dick. So did Brian. And we talked about Paul Lewicki. Paul had good stuff. In fact, Paul set up with me. I took 2 tables at the 86 National, but I only set up one of them. Paul and Janet took the other table because they had just gotten cards from the find. "Hey, you have cards from the find? Yeah, you'll pay me a small premium and you can do the show." I love it because that's going to get attention. The next year they were able to go off on their own to do the National.
One of the things I think will be said about you and hopefully said about me over the years, and I want to say this about Mr. Mint as well, because I had a great relationship with him. And then there was a period where he was ticked off, a confrontation we had that I wouldn't acquiesce. But you know what? If we are judged at some point by the quality of our friendships, you're going to get an A. I hope I get an A. I think Mr. Mint gets an A. He had some great friends that he worked with. Now, he had some falling outs. I'm not saying he's perfect, but the quality of these guys that we're mentioning, they're knowledgeable, they have a good integrity, and they work hard, and they're pillars of our industry. And they were in Mr. Mint's close orbit. I don't think people have really acknowledged that he wasn't a one-hit wonder or a one-man show. He was a headliner, but he had lots of people behind him that really enjoyed being not in his wake, but just being right there. And they had to also say yes. If they'd have said, Al, I'm tapped out, I can't take these 50 sets that you're trying to offload, he would have found somebody else.
He also did not need cash immediately.
Except in the early days.
Yeah. But by the time he was really rolling, he did not need cash immediately. Rich, this is $1,000, $1,200 to you. Fine. Pay me when you can. Fine. That was fine. I'm not saying we ever did that, but that's how he worked. When he kept track of who owed what to him. Then at the Willow Grove show, he got these deals. People would pay him because they were having such great shows, and then he'd have more cards to give him. It was a wonderful cycle.
I realize it. I don't think I bought cards from DeCourcy. Probably bought cards from Broggi. I bought stuff from Joe Esposito. Definitely bought stuff from Brian Morris. Bought stuff from Paul Lewicki. I'm trying to remember, did I ever buy a card from Mr. Mint? Because he was not a retailer.
He wasn't a retailer. But I actually sold him stuff, or I arranged for a few deals for him.
See, the problem I had with him, and it's my side of the story, he's not here, but he was very influential in terms of the market for the sets and the cards, the golden era cards, the 50s cards. And he would say, hey, I made the market. But the problem was he didn't want to tell me what he paid. He only wanted to tell me what it was retail. And yet we
were doing price guide.
I'm saying
retail. I hate to tell you this, but I think he's right.
No, I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying that he was having a steady stream and then he was selling it to somebody else. And then the price that they were going to put it at that maybe hadn't sold yet, Rich. I'm just saying. And I was saying, I need to track the realized sales. And he said, no, you don't. You just need to listen to me. And I said,
he is right, though. If he's made a sale, he's got a point.
No, he bought it for $800. He is selling it to you for $1,000 or one of the guys, and they're going to sell it for $1,500. So which price is it? It's all of those prices, but the $1,500 doesn't count until it sells.
You used to tell me we are tracking transactions.
We're trying to, but willing buyer, willing seller, knowledgeable seller, selling a whole collection, not even a distress sale, but a bulk sale. You got to take that into account.
Right. I'm with you, but I do think he has a valid point. This is 35 years later. That argument's kind of done. Hearing the story I'm going to tell you, I think he had a valid point on that.
I can't believe you're going against me, and he's not.
Hey, somebody's got to defend him.
He was an amazing.
We love Al. We love the
strong-willed. The people that get ahead a lot of times are strong-willed and not necessarily abrasive, but they know what they want. They go for it. I appreciated that in him until I didn't tell him how to run his business. I guess he felt like he could tell me how to run mine, but it wasn't all wet. I just couldn't acquiesce. I couldn't accede to his demands. They were essentially demands.
Yeah, and you're right, but I'm just saying he has a point. It actually became in like 89 a thing where he put an ad, the King in his court, in an SCD ad, and then 2 weeks later, Josh Evans had a payback ad. It was great to see a hobby feud play out in real time.
I'm going to be haunted by who's Turtle. I don't remember the other characters, but he was Vinny. He wasn't the handsome one, but he was the alpha, and you had to acknowledge when you were working with him. Thanks, Rich.
What were the profit margins on making a magazine and a book?
It's completely different than the COMC model.
Right.
And we could talk about that conceptually. Some businesses in this industry scale differently.
You've never really talked about how businesses scale, have you?
Nat Turner's figured it out. He's figured it out big time.
He's done a great job.
Yeah. Thanks, Rich.
The man in the house of cards.